2026 has turned into the year Ukraine became a genuine long-range power. Record numbers of drones have flown into Russia and the occupied territories, and record numbers of targets have gone up in flames as a result. Even if the year stopped right here, Ukraine would already be looking back on an extraordinary 2026. But Ukraine has more in store, a lot more. The plan ahead is brutal, wildly ambitious, and if Ukraine actually pulls it off, the results could be enormous. The target list has been drawn up, and the work has already started. What's coming for Russia is the next phase of a deep strike campaign that's already left Putin reeling. On July 26th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made the announcement. After meeting with the country's top military leadership, a new list of priority targets had been finalized, designed both to build on the success of Ukraine's existing long-range strike campaign and to hit targets Russia desperately wants to protect, some of which may not have even been reachable a few months ago. Zelensky said, "The growing range of Ukraine's drones made this new list possible, alongside the repeated failure of Russian air defenses to stop strikes on oil refineries, military bases, and airfields that Ukraine's long-range campaign has already hit directly. Today, we agreed to continue our operations and updated the list of priority goals in accordance with the real impact on Russia and its ability to continue and prolong this war." Zelensky said, adding, "The main goal is that our long-range pressure will further push Russia towards diplomacy by complicating the production of weapons components, oil, and other economic losses, and returning this war to its home harbor." So, Ukraine's goal is really twofold: bring the war home to Russia and pressure Putin into negotiating. We'll get to how realistic that actually is shortly. As for the list itself, it wasn't just Zelensky's work, Chorhan Musica Torshe. It was put together alongside Ukraine's new commander-in-chief Mikhailo Drapati, chief of the general staff, Ohar Skybyuk, and interim defense minister Yevhen Kamara. Drapati's input might be the most notable piece of this, Torshan Music Sor having only taken over as commander-in-chief on July 22nd, replacing outgoing commander Oleksandr Sursky. This is his first real opportunity to show what he brings to the role, and it remains to be seen whether Hey Music, the targets he helped select, will move the needle for Ukraine. Naturally, Hey Music, the biggest question is the obvious one. What exactly does Ukraine plan to hit? Hey Music, that part stays murky. Zelensky and his team haven't disclosed what's actually on the list, which isn't surprising. Telling Russia which targets are next just gives the Kremlin time to stack air defenses around them. You could argue Ukraine had an opportunity here to leak a fake list and lure Russian defenses away from the real targets, but perhaps that gambit felt like too much risk, and it's simpler to keep everything quiet until the drones are already in the air and the fire share music have started. Still, Ukraine's actions so far in 2026 in music give us some clues about what might be coming. This year has seen Ukraine unleash a sweeping deep strike campaign with oil refineries, energy infrastructure, weapons factories, air defense sites, logistics hubs, and even the power grid in occupied Crimea, taking repeated hits from long-range drones. Ukraine has also been systematically picking off shadow fleet vessels in the Sea of Azov and Black Sea through July, reaching at least 192 ships struck as of July 22nd. And then there's Wildberries, Russia's answer to Amazon, which has taken a relentless pounding with roughly a tenth of the company's warehouses and inventory destroyed, according to a July 27th Newsweek report. The damage from those strikes alone runs into the billions of dollars, and that's precisely what Ukraine is after: maximum economic pain for Russia. Given that Chorhan Music Tour, it's reasonable to assume at least some of the new priority targets carry an economic angle. More Wildberries facilities could well be in the crosshairs. Music, especially with 90% of the company's logistics network still standing, representing many more billions in potential damage to a business targeted specifically because it supplies military gear, drones, and components to Russian troops. It's also a safe bet that more oil refineries made the list. On July 25th, Ukraine struck the Tyumen oil refinery, roughly 2,000 kilometers from the front line, a strike that shows just how far Ukrainian drones can now reach. Meaning refineries, once considered out of range, may now be fair game. Keep that range figure in mind. Will him music circle back to it? There are further hints buried in the Kyiv Independent's coverage of Zelensky's new list. The strategic depth that has long been a Russian advantage is now becoming a particular problem for the political and military leadership of Russia, as the majority of Russian air defense systems are concentrated around Moscow, government residences, the Crimean Bridge, and St. Petersburg. The outlet quotes Zelensky as saying, "Yet Ukraine's drones have repeatedly shown they can punch through those defenses, music anyway." That leaves two possibilities. One is that Zelensky named those specific places because they genuinely are the priorities, which music tracks. Ukraine wants Crimea isolated. So continued strikes on the Kerch Bridge connecting it to Russia makes sense, and hitting Moscow and St. Petersburg serves Ukraine's interests too, since those are the two cities that matter most to Putin personally. Russia's capital and Putin's hometown are supposed to be the best protected music places in the country. So any successful strike there chips away at his image as protector of the Russian people, arguably just as valuable as the economic damage from Ukraine's other strikes. The second possibility is that Ukraine is tracking where Russia's air defenses are actually moving. If Putin is concentrating his defenses around the places Zelensky named, that could mean other targets once thought unreachable are now both within range and lightly defended. There are already reports of Russia relocating air defenses from the Arctic music to protect the sites it considers most critical. And Zelensky himself has suggested Russia is shuffling its air defense systems around the country, implying Ukraine knows where those systems are coming from and therefore which targets have grown more exposed as a result. It's possible those newly vulnerable sites are now the real priorities as Putin tries to wrap himself and a select circle of Russians in a shrinking defensive bubble. We'll see how this plays out. Zelensky has also gone out of his way to make clear Russia won't be able to hear music to stop what's coming, pointing to the numbers. More than 1,000 successful long-range strike missions carried out since Ukraine launched its campaign of long-range sanctions earlier this year. And those strikes keep reaching farther. The Taymyr refinery strike wasn't even the record. That belongs to a strike days earlier on the Omsk refinery, roughly 500 kilometers from Ukraine's border. Shorka music a tour, and according to Zelensky, Ukraine's drones haven't even hit their ceiling yet, already capable of reaching targets 3,000 kilometers or more away, putting the Urals, Siberia, and huge swaths of territory far beyond Moscow within striking distance. Again, this is all about sending a message. Zelensky wants Putin to grasp that Russia's sheer size, historically its greatest music strategic advantage, has become a liability instead. Russia is being forced to shuffle its air defenses around music because it simply doesn't have enough to cover everywhere at once. As Ukrainian drone range keeps growing music, so does the list of viable targets, opening the door to new priorities. For now, Ukraine seems content to keep Russia guessing. Will it double down on Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Crimea, or reach out to newly exposed targets even farther away that have lost their air defense cover? Russia won't know until the strikes land. And speaking of range, what Putin thinks he needs to defend is about to shift again, because Ukraine is developing weapons that can reach even farther than what it has now. Potentially a real turning point. Quick reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to hit that button and turn on notifications so you catch what we've got coming next. Ukraine has already demonstrated it can hit targets up to 3,000 km out, torch music a tour, and more is coming, significantly more. Just days before revealing the priority list, Zelensky disclosed that Ukraine is actively working to extend its drone range to 4,000 km. Work, he says, should be finished before the end of 2026. Add another 1,000 km of reach and Russia's far east comes into play. Bad news for Putin, and it's set to get worse still. Beyond this year's expected 1,000 km boost, Zelensky claims 2027 will bring drones capable of traveling between 5,000 and 10,000 km. He didn't elaborate much further, understandably staying cagey on specifics, but making a claim like that means he's likely seen technology Ukraine hasn't yet revealed to the world or to Russia. It's one more warning shot. Ukraine has the list, and it will soon be able to strike targets Putin never imagined were within reach. On top of all that, Ukraine is also developing its own ballistic missile. The weapon built by Firepoint, the same company behind many of Ukraine's long-range strike drones. Music isn't just a concept. A July 18 Kyiv Post report revealed that Firepoint says the missile is nearing completion and could be ready for use against Russia as early as fall 2026. Firepoint's owner and chief designer, Howard Music Dennis Stillerman, said of the new missile, the military will decide where, but I think these will immediately be significant targets. Firepoint is actually developing two separate ballistic missiles, the FP7 with a range up to 200 kilometers and the FP9 capable of reaching targets as far as 55 kilometers from Ukraine. That opens up more speculation about the new list. Some priority targets may be places Ukraine has already hit with drones, but once ballistic missiles enter the mix, those same sites could go from damaged to outright destroyed by weapons carrying far more explosive power. Here's our best guess. Ukraine's new list likely blends previously struck targets like the Kerch Bridge with newly reachable sites in Siberia and Russia's far east, made possible by growing drone range. And if Firepoint's timeline holds and ballistic missiles arrive within the next couple of months, expect heavier attacks on Russian oil refineries near the border too, particularly ones that may have lost air defense coverage. Music as Russia pulls systems back toward Moscow. What Ukraine now has in terms of both range and firepower is enough variety to put Music Putin firmly on the back foot. Ukraine can effectively hit almost anything it chooses, and Zelensky wants Putin to understand that. Because at its core, Music, this priority target list announcement is about one thing: forcing Putin to the negotiating table. Zelensky said as much in the quote that opened this piece and expanded on it in the same Telegram post. We have made all the necessary proposals to the political leadership of Russia to end the war with a decent peace. All partners know what is needed. Our accuracy is effectively working Music to create the conditions for real diplomacy. In other words, Ukraine has flipped the script entirely. For years, it was Russia using long-range strikes to try to bully Ukraine into surrender, largely because Ukraine had no equivalent long-range capability of its own. Now it does, and Music, then some, meaning Ukraine can become the one applying pressure to force Putin to the table. Both the Telegraph and the Economist point to exactly that as Ukraine's end goal. The former highlights both the deep strike campaign and Ukraine's logistics lockdown effort in the occupied territories as ways Ukraine is grinding down Russia's military to force negotiations, all while Russian advances inside Ukraine have stalled to the point that 2026 could end up being Russia's worst year of the war. Every gain Russia manages now comes slowly and at enormous cost in soldiers, while more of Russia's war machine refineries, targets inside the country, logistics nodes in occupied territory gets destroyed by the day. The Economist goes further, arguing Ukraine is deliberately trying to threaten Putin into peace talks, and it's hard to disagree. Ukraine's new list reads as clearly as any threat the country has issued, backed by the long-range successes it's already racked up in 2026. As the outlet puts it, Mr. Zelensky's threats are not idle. Ukraine is bombing refineries in Russia, forcing petrol rationing in over a dozen regions. Trot music tour strikes on roads, bridges, railways, and ferries into Crimea are starving the Russian-annexed peninsula home to a massive military grouping of the means to function. Ukraine understands that most of Russia would rather avoid more of the pain it's already feeling, which is exactly why it's gone public with the existence of this new Hey music list. But Putin isn't all of Russia, and that distinction may end up being the sticking point. Ukraine's strategy of pressuring Putin toward the table might simply fail because Putin has dug himself so deep into this war that backing down in any real way could bury him politically. Russia's recent rhetoric around peace talks reflects exactly that. Earlier in July, the Financial Times reported that sources close to Putin say he's unlikely to engage in any serious peace talks before at least February 2027. For the Russians, the preferred outcome is still that the Americans hand Ukraine over to us. They are not even hinting at any concessions. Hen music, they keep repeating the same objectives. Their negotiating position essentially leaves no room for meaningful talks, one source told the outlet. Rather than acknowledge the damage Ukraine is inflicting and will keep inflicting, Putin appears to be hardening his position. Trot music chore insisting Russia is winning despite plenty of evidence to the contrary. He's demanding more concessions at precisely the moment Ukraine may be at its strongest point of the entire invasion, which doesn't add up. And that's the core problem. Putin has become trapped by his own war. More recently, on July 27th, the Kremlin dismissed reports of a possible U.S.-Ukraine air truce plan, tracking music torch as mere media speculation not worth taking seriously until an actual proposal is presented. Hardly the response of someone genuinely enthusiastic about a peace process. He's mostly used as leverage to extract concessions from Ukraine. Russia is also unlikely to want an aerial truce for another reason. While it would spare the country from what's coming as Ukraine works through its priority list, it would also stop Russia from launching missiles and drones at Ukrainian civilians, a core piece of Russia's campaign of terror. Ukraine would prefer peace, but if Putin refuses, the strikes will keep coming. Hem music, a warning shot landed just days after Zelensky revealed the new list when Ukraine sent 390 drones into the Moscow region. Russia claims to have intercepted most of them, but the message was likely the point regardless. A reminder to Putin that Moscow isn't safe, and neither is anywhere else in Russia. Euromaidan Press reports Hem music, a 150% increase in Ukrainian deep strikes since the start of 2026. And United 24 Media adds that this surge amounts to 697 targets hit across Russia as of July 10th, costing the Kremlin $6.1 billion in the process. If Putin won't yield to the pressure, more is coming. That's the message Zelensky wants firmly lodged in his head as Ukraine gears up for its next round of strikes against these new priority targets. Putin now has to live with fear of the unknown, unsure when Ukraine's drones will strike or where until the explosions themselves provide the answer. Keep an eye on the channel over the next few weeks. We suspect we'll be covering more than a few of these newly named priorities. In the meantime, if you're curious why wildberries has become such a favorite target, we've got a video breaking down those strikes and how they fit into a broader Hem music campaign meant to turn ordinary Russians against Putin. And if you got something out of this one, subscribe to the Military Show and hit the notification bell music so you don't miss it as Ukraine starts working through its list.